Hello, and welcome to Living Spark, a project of the Spark of Humanity Network. I am a member of the Spark of Humanity Network, and one could perhaps suggest that so are you. Indeed, that all of us through. Oh, okay. I'll unstart.
No, no, you should.
Hello, and welcome to the Spark, to Living Spark, a project of the Spark of Humanity Network. I'm a member. I'm Danielle O'Halasey, and I have been fascinated by the spark practice in which we acknowledge that we each have in us a spark. Sometimes I like to say glow, whatever. We have our humanity inside of us, and so does everybody else, by the way. And that by recognizing the humanity of others, and it strengthens our humanity and vice versa, that if we recognize our own humanity, that can strengthen that of others. We have been blessed to have over the last year these living mosaic, which further carry this into the idea. um, I'm gonna simplify it a little bit or put it into more familiar language, that we all have a part to play. This world is a very troubled place, and we all have a role to play, and we may choose to embrace that role or not. But that I kind of hope that as many of us that can embrace it will do. This episode is being shown out of sequence for when we're recording it, and if you've been watching this, you will be familiar with the fact that I assign myself a little bit of homework at the end of each episode, and unfortunately, because it's being filmed out of sequence, just to have it available if I can't make a broadcast, that means that I don't know what the homework was last week. So we're not going to do that. Instead, I am very pleased to introduce a familiar face. If you watch The Living Mosaic at all, then you will know that the host was and always will be in my heart, Martha Holden. And Martha is joining us today. Hi, Martha.
Hi, Danielle. Good to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. Um, we're going to do this a little different from the format that I imagine by the time you're watching this will be fairly well established. We're gonna talk about this whole idea and maybe kick around a few experiences and a few of the reasons that we've gravitated toward this idea of spark's a great, isn't it a great image? Like there's this fire that wants to burn that is in many of us dimly there, barely there, like a campfire that's just barely glowing, and we need to feed it and give it a little air for it to grow. Anyway, I love that term. I love that imagery. But I'm going to ask you, Martha, from a totally different perspective. If I stumbled across this on Orca's YouTube or their channel, and let's say my reaction is like, "What are you talking?" Like it just seems. What are you grounding this in? How do we put this into daily practice? But also, how will it how will it benefit? How will it be an agent of change? How will I become an agent of change just by thinking differently about this?
Is that the question?
That's the rambling version of my wanted to be a question. Yes.
It was 4 or 5 questions. I didn't keep track.
So,
Well, first, a little bit of the history of the Spark of Humanity Insight may help. I I had been a prosecuting attorney in the criminal courts of Yolo County, California, and I was released from my job, and after time flailing around, I was offered a job as a criminal defense attorney. And I had been fully acculturated in the prosecutorial mindset, and I was flailing around in my bed one night being offered this nice job, but how I could not get my head around the concept of becoming a defense attorney, because we had terrible names for them in law enforcement, and I just didn't know how to do it. And I think now, from my current perspective, I see that as being a form of prayer. Often when we hit bottom, when we're desperate, whether we think of ourselves as praying or not, my experience is that there's an efficacy, and you get an idea. And it struck me that there's a spark of humanity in everyone. And it's like that struck a tuning fork in me that I had been very careful to have covered and was not letting anything at, because I didn't want to be in touch with anything that was true and real at that point in my life. But that got through that, and so I proceeded to accept the job and practice law for several years in that office from the perspective that there is a spark of humanity in everyone. This includes my fellow attorneys and the judges and the opposing attorneys and my clients and federal law enforcement personnel, DEA, FBI, Secret Service, all of them, the federal marshals. And I found, and it just became unconscious that I was treating everybody, as you would say, from that place of humanity. I was connecting with that in everybody. And as I was preparing to leave that job, I realized that my practice of law, it's like there was WD-40 or cream rinse or something, that it was so much smoother than my colleagues in that office. It was easier for me to get deals, to talk to people, to get phone calls, to meet with people. My relationship with my clients was smoother. I wasn't, didn't have to grouse about them. And I thought that there is really something going on here. And I didn't try to analyze it. I just knew it was a gift. And I had a theory that if I was up for transforming the legal system, of course, being me, and the idea that if attorneys were trained in this idea of connecting with and affirming the spark in the other, that we could spend a lot more time out of court and getting their clients. Anyway, it seemed like a good idea. I did have one experience while I was an attorney, defense attorney, that really sort of concretized it for me. I was meeting with a client, a very unhappy young man who was facing a lot of time in prison. And because he was entitled to have a private conference with his attorney, we were in a little room together, but had windows that had wire in them so you couldn't break through them. And we were in the middle of the federal marshal's office, which had halls out of it, and there was a lot of glass, so the federal marshals could see what was going on in that office, but it would take a long time for them to get there. And I'm not sure, as I recall, none of the marshals were paying any attention whatsoever. Who could expect them to? And my client picked up a pencil and he lifted it up, and I could tell that he was thinking of aiming at, his body language was, I'm going to jab this into your eye and wiggle it around, and that'll take care of your brain. and because I had been I was habituated to this practice. I did not have to consciously think. It's a gift, right? My default had become, I think, at least sufficient at this level to connect with I could, like something went out of me, and there was this resonance between us, there was this bond between us, and he just put down the pencil and sort of like,
Wow.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, not, I can't do it. So that let me know that because my job depended on it, I think it was easier. The application of this insight did not go through a cognitive process with me. It just hit my inner tuning fork, which we all have, and it hit that, and it nestled in because it was necessary for my employment. really, so I think that it was easier for me to begin to practice it because of it. And I had a similar experience a few years later after I was home, and it was, I think, during the Gulf War, and people were plotting civil disobedience if it was necessary, and we had a training. Some trainers came in, and those of us who thought we might be interested in doing that had us line up in lines opposing each other, and one outfit was supposed to be haranguing the other line and just, threatening them, and and those of us, I was in the line of I'm just here, and the person who was haranguing me, I just sort of focused on the spark of humanity. Granted, he knew me. He was the pastor at the church I was attending then, so that helped, but I suspect. But he just sort of raised his hand and said, "I can't do this." So, it may have been him, but I was focusing on the spark of humanity. So, I don't know what to say. That didn't answer your question, but they're good stories.
No, you said that I asked you 4 or 5 questions. I think that was 4 or 5 answers, and I appreciated all of them. I mean, from the beginning of what you were saying, that there's that, somebody years ago was friends with someone who was in prison. A friend of mine was friends with someone in prison and would go frequently to visit. And he said to me one day, he said, once you've been a prisoner for a while, it seems like you start to believe that there are only 2 choices, to be a prisoner or to be a guard. You forget that there is a whole world outside of these bars. So these are the polarizations that you're experiencing day to day. And so what you were saying about being first a prosecutor, then a defense attorney, it would be very easy for someone to get lost in that switch over to
binary thinking. Yeah.
So I don't know, it's very impressive to me that was the beginning of your awareness of the spark of humanity, because that there are a lot of ways that could go wrong. That change could have gone wrong for you.
And I can take no credit for it. I like that part best of all. I don't know where it came from, but I'm glad it hit me in a way that I could accept and continue to develop.
Yeah. You reminded me with that of, I used to work, I had a job working as a crisis worker with chronically mentally ill people. In Vermont. We were actually considered cutting edge. This is in the late 80s, early 90s, because we were taking people from a state hospital and bringing them back into the community, but we were visiting them. They needed a lot of support, and to keep them from ending up back in that system. And that was my job for 7 years.
Wow.
And it was my first night on the job. I got a call from a woman who said, "My son just, he's losing control. He's one of your patients. Please come and deal with him." I came, and as I walked through the door, he was holding a knife, and he ran out the door, which is good because I was in no way prepared to have him run toward me. And then he ran to the nearest bridge, which wasn't very far, and put one over the edge. And so I'm realizing that was my crash course in the same thing, that somehow walking up to him and saying, it must be really hard for you. Like, that didn't come from a structured thing inside of me. Like, now I must say this, or that I had training and this is how you do this. I was suddenly faced with someone who was armed, was dangerous, at least to himself, and I wasn't sure he wasn't going to be dangerous to me. He wasn't. And we talked, I was able to talk him into coming back and indeed trusting me somewhat. There was a conscious process. All of this is stuff I haven't thought about for years, so I thank you for reminding me of it. There was a conscious process where I would be walking into someone's door. Like, I remember one person in particular. We called them clients, not patients, but I was walking in her door, and she was prone to violence, and she was, shouldn't really maybe have been living in an apartment by herself in the community, but we were keeping her there by visiting frequently. And I remember that was the first time that I paused on my way to the door and just said, take a breath and find. I wouldn't have called it spark of humanity. I would have said, but somehow clear yourself. Whatever's going to work in there, you don't know it. It's going to have to come from somewhere else. It's going to have to move through you. And that was really someone who I ended up being kind of friends with. She was very difficult, but I found her fun. I liked her sense of humor.
Yeah.
I still tell people that the best Thanksgiving I ever experienced was with her. Her house was a pit. It was scary to eat food in there, but she wanted to cook a turkey and wanted me to come and sit with her, and I
Oh,
did. And that there was something about that it
yeah.
didn't feel like, oh, I'm doing a good thing for someone else, by the way. It felt like I'm having the best Thanksgiving ever with a friend of mine.
Yeah.
And yeah, so yeah,
Okay.
interesting how these things speak to us through, not necessarily through meditation or prayer. They can, but it can be it often is the demands of our work environment and the
Or our
stuff.
families.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, it becomes real when it's another human being.
yeah,
Otherwise, it's just sort of theoretical.
yeah,
And to ground it in an actual experience, which is one of the things I like about the Spark meditations that we've done and which will be available on the Spark of Humanity website in a few weeks, that to learn how to do this, to envision the person whose spark you want to connect with, somebody you know,
yeah.
and then you can move on to people you don't know personally but you've just heard of. But it's a powerful practice, I
Yeah,
find.
yeah, yeah, interesting. I yeah, I'll probably do a whole episode on this at some point, so I'll just briefly touch on it here. But I was doing a meditation every day about compassion, and it was a structured thing. The goal was to picture oneself, myself, on the right side of me, and to look for the very worst possible impression of myself, to look at the greedy, the selfish, the irritable, all of the worst stuff in that image of myself, and then to look to the left, imagination, look to the left, and picture a population of people who are very in need, people who are hungry in a war zone, whatever it was. And you were warned. The only thing about this structured meditation was to not uh, it isn't someone you know. It's just a group of people. And of course, then to come back to the center and calmly contemplate which deserves my attention more. And I was
Oh,
in the, yeah, beautiful. I was in the hospital. I'd been doing this for a couple of months and my halo was shining. I was just top
I'm
of the
sure.
world. I was so proud of myself for the great humility that I was showing.
Oh, good.
And there I was in the hospital. I was just there for some tests, but I was there for a few days last spring. And I was trying to do this exercise, and I picture the worst image of myself over here. And then I had a roommate on the other side of the curtain over here. She was older than me. She was much more frail. She got confused terribly. She kept hitting the button to call the nurse when she thought she was turning the television on. And then every
Oh,
once in a while she'd ask me to come over and fix it, and I would do that. But Maria was there on my left, and so I'm like, there's the worst version of me, and then here is a population of people in need. Maria, would you stop making so much? Oh, will you just stop? Like, I'm looking for a population of people who need something. Like, just go away with it. This is right, right. So the jump from the transition from I'm thinking these thoughts and I'm even imagining them and visualizing them to actually embracing and doing can be a difficult one.
well, it's it's humbling. It can be humbling, and at least for myself, I find that every opportunity to increase my humility is gratefully received at this point. So, yeah, you learned that, you got that, so that's good. Congratulations. Now, don't
Thank
get puffed up with too much pride because you got it.
Right. Right. Yeah. So what would you say to someone? I mean, like I've learned that I wouldn't be coming back to your broadcast. I wouldn't be doing my own now if I hadn't said to myself, if I hadn't said, look, I don't get it, but I know and trust Martha, so I'm going to try it. I'm going to literally try it. Just try it out. And as I've mentioned before, I haven't talked anyone off a bridge in a long time, and I haven't done any great peacemaking or whatever, but I did bring it out into the world and try it a couple of times with cantankerous old people. By the way, myself being a cantankerous old person, and having the opportunity to just think like, what if I take a step back and look for the light in them? Anyway, that's been my experience that I had to do before I believed. But what if
Okay.
somebody, yeah, yeah.
I like that, and I think that's that's very true. People who get stuck in, I don't know how it works, therefore I'm not going to try it. I haven't seen it work. I haven't experienced it working, therefore I'm not going to believe in it. That's, I honestly don't know what to do with those people, except tell my story or tell your story and just be there and hopefully live a life with enough clarity and, if I may say, joy, and let's say hope. Let's, that people say, oh, I don't like her, I don't understand what she's saying, but oh, was it you saying, Winston Churchill said, the Yanks will do the right thing when they've tried everything else.
Yes.
When we say in another culture, when you hit bottom, when they can't think of anything else to do. People make New Year's resolutions, not me, but those inflection points in people's lives, I don't know how they come about, and I don't need to. I can only do what I can do, which is not try to argue anybody into anything or out of anything, but just live as robustly and with the integrity. Just living with integrity. When we get, you're getting closer and closer to who you essentially are, to your true self. And we all are, hopefully, unless, if we're willing. Willingness is important. But, just all I can do is live with the integrity and whatever else I might be able to scuffle up, like stamina and good humor. But, to do that, and if that attracts, good. And if it doesn't attract, well, may something else happen that attracts you, but I can't, there's no sense arguing. I've got my life to live, and I want to be living where I'm most useful. And where I'm most useful, despite my background as an attorney, I was a lousy attorney. Not trying to convince anybody of anything, just be it. Don't be it, don't talk about it. My Fair Lady, don't talk, show me. It's that sort of a thing. So, and that's easier on me. As I get older, I have less and less energy, and I find that I need to be paying attention to just investing my energy where it can be most useful. And I know that trying to talk somebody out of something or something, maybe talking somebody out of going off the bridge, yes, but talking to somebody into something, I've got things I need to do with my energy, and that it's not one today.
Okay. I'm seeing a clue that we've just got a couple of minutes left.
Right.
I have really appreciated this. It's been great. I didn't know any of the origin story of your intersection with the Spark of Humanity, so it's really nice to hear that and to learn those things. So many thoughts going around in my head right now. Do you have anything you'd like to say before we wrap up?
I'm very grateful to Orca Media, of course, and I'm grateful to Rose, who sort of administers this whole thing here. I'm grateful to you. I'm grateful to whatever got you willing and interested in doing this, because it's a total kick. I'm just so happy. It's like a succession thing happening, and I love it. And so there's a lot of gratitude, and I will be back available intermittently through the year, and would be, of course, always willing to show up here and talk with you further about these things. Yeah. So
I was going to ask, because it would be really nice.
Yeah. Okay. That's it for me. Take it away,
All right.
Danielle.
Well, I can't assign myself a homework right now, because this is going to be shown out of sequence with other episodes, and therefore I'm going to leave everyone with good wishes. And whatever I told you to do last time, which I didn't tell you to do, I told myself, but I would love it if somebody would get inspired to try some of these things out. Let's put in another couple of weeks at that, and maybe I'll get it right if I keep trying for another 2 weeks. Martha, always good to talk to you. Always good to see you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.